The rain had begun to fall, drenching the landscape and changing the world into something somber. While I was in the barn, feeding the cats, the sound of the storm was steady, a rhythmic drumming against the tin roof. The air was thick with the scent of wet hay and a more profound smell, like soil disturbed by sorrow. As I looked out, I noticed Whisper, the wild mare that no one had ever tamed, standing quietly just outside the fence. Her coat was muddy and her mane was stuck to her neck, but there was something different about her eyes. They were pleading rather than wild. Then came a sound that sliced through the chaos of the storm, a faint, heart-wrenching cry, softer than the rain, yet striking a chord deep within me. Without thinking, I dropped the feed bucket into the mud and stepped out into the downpour. The cool rain soaked through my flannel shirt almost immediately, but I didn't hesitate. Whisper stood firm, her hooves sunk into the earth, her breathing slow and steady. Despite her disheveled state, something in her presence spoke of quiet dignity. Her eyes, usually so filled with fear or flight, were different that night. They seemed to hold a determination, a steady resolve that compelled me to follow as she turned toward the tree line. I was drawn to her, sensing that she needed my help. The woods were filled with wet underbrush and scattered branches from seasons past, the scent of pine intensified by the rain. As I navigated the tangle of nature, I ducked under low-hanging branches and splashed through puddles. Whisper halted unexpectedly beneath an old pine tree, its broken limb hanging like a fractured wing. She shifted, her gaze fixed on a small mound at the base of the tree. Curiosity bubbled within me, and when I approached, I discovered a tiny puppy curled into the cold, damp earth. His trembling body was nearly obscured by mud, as if he had given up hope. In that moment, it became clear why Whisper had called me into the storm. Together, we needed to help this helpless creature. The storm continued to rage outside the barn, but inside, the atmosphere was different. It felt cozy and secure, almost as if we had stepped into another world, separate from the chaos outside. I laid the puppy down on an old towel in the heated tack room, unsure of what to do next. As I watched him, I noticed his shallow breathing and barely open eyes. He seemed so fragile, like something precious that had nearly slipped away. Although he no longer whined, the silence surrounding him felt heavy, as if a part of him had retreated to protect the rest. I took a dry towel and began to rub him gently, hoping to stir some warmth back into his tiny limbs. Just then, I heard the door creak open behind me. It was Cassie, a look of surprise crossing her face. "Where'd you find him?" she asked, already springing into action. As I looked up to reply, Whisper appeared in the doorway behind her, shaking off the remaining rain. She seemed to want to ensure we understood her role in this. She had brought me to this moment. Before meeting Whisper, I had found the little puppy huddled beneath branches, cold and scared, with his fur clinging to his skin in limp patches. Despite his open eyes, they looked more haunted than alert. Crouching down, I reached out slowly to avoid startling him. To my relief, he offered no resistance. Lifting him carefully from his shelter, I cradled his tiny frame against my chest. His ribs were sharp against his thin body, and when I felt his heartbeat, it was quick and fluttery, like a moth's wings. Wrapping him in my coat, I made my way back to the barn, Whisper trotting beside me, matching my pace. She was there, steadfast, as if her purpose was to make sure he was seen and cared for. Inside the tack room, Cassie moved instinctively, checking the puppy's vital signs with practiced hands. She wrapped him snugly in fleece blankets and placed a warm water bottle against his belly. In that moment, we both hoped that perhaps he had made it through the worst, sheltered from the storm's fury just outside the walls. Whisper stood outside the tack room, her soaked coat slowly drying in the hay. She remained steadfast, as if she understood the journey we were about to embark on with the little puppy. It seemed she had known all along that he needed help, patiently guarding the entrance as a storm brewed around us. Inside, we were met with an unexpected sight. Eli knelt beside the pup, his wide eyes filled with a mix of wonder and concern. His presence was calming, and for a brief moment, we watched quietly. The rhythm of the pup's shallow breaths created a fragile bond between us, fostering a glimmer of hope. But that hope was quickly interrupted. The pup's body tensed suddenly, a twitch indicating something turbulent beneath the surface. It It was not simple fear, it felt deeper, a response to a pain or memory we couldn't see. His front paw shot forward, teeth bared just enough to reveal a soft, broken growl that seemed to echo his anguish. Cassie broke the silence, her voice steady yet somber. "That's not just fear," she said quietly, "that's trauma." I stepped back, taking in the sight before me. The pup, ribs trembling from exhaustion, bore an expression that hinted at alertness and an underlying terror. It was clear he was afraid, but not of us. His fright came from something more sinister that had left its mark on him. Eli, sitting cross-legged beside the pup, looked at him with eyes that hadn't yet learned to fully grasp the complexity of trauma but sensed its weight. "Do you think someone dumped him?" he whispered, as if afraid that saying it too loudly would make it real. "Like, on purpose?" I didn't respond, but the question echoed in my mind. There were no tire tracks around, no signs indicating someone nearby might have abandoned him. Just the extraordinary image of a wild horse standing guard over a tiny puppy, entwining their fates in that stormy clearing. What could connect such different beings? Cassie took a deep breath and shifted her weight back onto her heels. If we keep him, it's going to be a long road ahead. He might lash out sometimes, or he may never trust us. Her calm suggested experience, born from many rescues and fragile beginnings. As she reached for the stethoscope, she listened to the pup's heartbeat, revealing that his cortisol levels were alarmingly high. "He's not just malnourished," she continued, her voice low. "His body is reacting to fear." In that moment, the weight of responsibility settled among us. Together, we must find a way to help this little soul heal, knowing that the journey would not be easy, but might also lead to unexpected connections. I found myself reflecting on the connection between Whisper and Scout, wondering what insights she might have had that we didn't. The morning after the storm brought a delicate light, almost hesitant, draping itself over the hills. It felt as if the sun was unsure whether the ground could handle its warmth just yet. As I stepped outside to check on Whisper, a part of me expected to find her gone, slipping back into the wild, as she often did. To my surprise, she stood there by the fence, accompanied by Dune, another wild Mustang. He was more robust and darker than Whisper, his watchful eyes revealing a hint of wariness as I drew nearer. Dune shifted his hooves in the damp grass, while Whisper remained steady, her gaze firmly fixed on the barn. Inside, Scout, the puppy Eli had named, was resting fitfully. His little body trembled with each sound, despite his attempts at drinking water and nibbling on soft food. Cassie was on the phone with a veterinary clinic, arranging for a checkup. It was then that we received an unexpected call from animal control. Someone had reported loose horses on private property. "They've gotten complaints in the past," Cassie said, her voice laced with concern as she held the phone between her shoulder and ear. "If they tie Whisper and Dune to us, we could have someone here in no time. They might even tranquilize them." I glanced out the barn window at Whisper and Dune, standing motionless in the mist. They seemed to know something that we didn't, as if they understood the stakes of this moment. We had not chosen them. They had chosen us. This realization shifted the situation from a simple rescue to a heavy responsibility we might not be able to manage. By nightfall, the tack room was quiet. The storm had expended its energy, leaving a stillness that settled like dust in the air. The old oil heater hummed, trying to fill the space with warmth, but instead, it deepened the enveloping silence. Scout lay curled among soft towels near the heater, finally finding rest, even as tension still rippled through his small body in his sleep. Occasionally, an ear would flick or a brow would tighten, suggesting he was haunted by unspoken fears. I perched on an overturned feed bucket across from him, elbows resting on my knees, hands clasped tight. I watched him, studying this fragile creature who had unwittingly become the focal point of our lives, a little being on which all our decisions seemed to hinge. Whisper's steady eyes lingered in my thoughts, filled with purpose and insistence, as if guiding me toward Scout and reminding me of the intertwining paths we now walked. The morning light poured gently into the barn, casting soft patches across Scout's blanket. I found him awake, head slightly raised, his ears perked at the sound of Eli's voice coming from upstairs. In his eyes, there was a flicker of life, a small but undeniable spark. While he wasn't wagging his tail yet, he was choosing to stay awake. and that felt like a victory in its own right. As Cassie arrived just after sunrise, the aroma of burnt earth mingled with hope. She had brought coffee, medical supplies, and a crate for our planned trip into town. We wanted to get Scout checked out, perhaps have blood work done, and even an X-ray. There was a chance he hadn't always been wild, and maybe even a microchip would offer clues to his past. We worked quietly, careful not to frighten him. Meanwhile, Whisper and Dune stood watch just beyond the pasture fence, like silent guardians. Stepping outside, I blinked in surprise. The field was empty, no sign of Whisper or Dune. Then we noticed them, the deep, fresh hoof prints leading away from the fence, veering sharply towards the north ravine, a treacherous area filled with thorn bushes and steep drops. Cassie frowned, noting something scared them. Initially, I thought it might have been a coyote, yet the way the tracks were spaced, staggered and frantic, suggested something more alarming. The horses had been startled, likely chased. It was unsettling to think whatever had caused the commotion had come so close to Scout. Feeling his tension return, I realized that the journey ahead was not just about rescuing him. It was about confronting the emotional weight that came with it. It brought up questions I hesitated to voice. Was this journey truly mine? Did I need to heal through something so fragile and wounded? In the days following the discovery of those tracks, Scout's transformation unfolded slowly but surely. He allowed Eli to sit near him, their knees almost touching as they began to bond. Yet he still flinched at loud noises, retreating whenever hands moved too quickly. But there was a notable change. He no longer cowered when I entered the room. A couple of nights following the horse's disappearance, I walked in to find Scout alert, ears perked, as if he was waiting for Whisper to make a return. It became clear. His journey toward healing was also about facing the fears that echoed from the past. What did it mean to carry this responsibility? And was I ready to embrace whatever it might require from me? The chill of dusk settled over the barn, the sky taking on a muted gray hue. Scout lay curled up near the humming heater, one paw tucked under his chin, drifting between sleep and awareness. Meanwhile, Cassie stood near the barn doors, her arms crossed tightly. Her stance reminded me of a time long ago, a moment marked by loss and the weight of unspoken fears. Silence hung heavy in the air until she finally spoke, her gaze fixed on the dimming light. "We need to talk about the next step." I recognized the seriousness in her voice. The clinic offered to place him in a trauma foster, someone who specializes in cases like this. A quiet home, no other animals. It's a good option, Jonas. The way she framed her words was soft, yet they felt as heavy as stones, weighing down the conversation. My gaze shifted to Scout, watching the rise and fall of his little body. He occasionally flinched at minor sounds, yet he rested with a fragile trust, one that took time to build. Trust that certainly hadn't sprung from the walls of any clinic. I wondered how he would cope away from here. "What if he doesn't do well away from us?" I asked, voicing my concern. In our minds, we all held the same worry. The world outside hadn't calmed. Whisper and Dune were missing, their hoofprints long washed away by the sun, yet their absence lingered like an unshakable shadow. We were drawn to focus on Scout's recovery, striving for a sense of normalcy, but fear quietly threaded through our conversations. In the back of our minds, we started to question if the threat was fully behind us. Had Whisper left to confront whatever danger awaited her? There was something primal in the connection between her and Scout, a protective instinct that seemed more than mere survival. Eli had taken to sleeping in the barn loft, right above where we kept the tack. He laughed about it, claiming it was for fun, but I noticed the careful way he moved in the mornings, as if fearing Scout could vanish if he looked away for a moment. Cassie, too, was softening. She had started bringing hand-sewn toys and lingering after checkups, almost as if she needed to reassure herself that Scout was still there, still alive. Once, I even caught her in a moment of tenderness, whispering his name gently, almost like she was testing out the kindness that he had not often known. As the evening darkened around us, the conversation about Scout's future felt urgent. The resolve in Cassie's demeanor was unmistakable, rooted in something deeper than mere anxiety. We needed to figure out what was best for Scout, but the decision hung heavy with uncertainty. Will he continue to heal, or will he retreat back into darkness? Each path seemed to carry its own fears. The night before the decision felt off from the beginning. The air was eerily quiet, with no wind rustling through the trees, and the hills surrounding the ranch seemed to hold their breath, as if waiting for something to unfold. Cassie stood inside the barn, her boots crunching on the straw-covered floor. She turned her gaze towards Scout, curled up contentedly against a folded saddle blanket. What if he thinks he's being abandoned again? She pondered aloud, worry etched across her face. Eli lingered nearby, pretending to adjust the feed bins, but frequently glancing at Scout, as if reassured by the pup's presence. But what if we're what's best for him? He questioned, his young voice cracking with emotion. What if he chose us, just like Whisper did? There was a moment of silence as the weight of those words settled in. None of us were wrong in our feelings, yet we all knew a decision was looming ahead. It was a difficult reality to face. Loving something did not guarantee we understood its needs. Cassie stepped closer, hands buried deep in her jacket pockets. He needs more than we can give him, Jonas. You've always known that. Her calm tone made it all the more challenging to respond. I glanced past her to Scout, who had stopped trembling, an act that should have brought comfort but instead felt like a void. He trusts us now, I finally said, a knot tightening in my stomach. Cassie nodded thoughtfully. Yes, and perhaps that's why it falls to us to let him go, the right way. Just then, Eli overheard and turned to us, heartbreak evident on his face. You're giving him away? The sadness in his eyes turned my heart heavy. It was as if he could sense the shift in our intentions. We're trying to do what's best, I replied softly, my voice barely above a whisper. The barn remained silent, the air thick with tension. The truth was there, waiting for us to confront it, like the quiet space between a heartbeat and whatever comes next. As we stood there, the barn was infused with the earthy scent of rain-soaked wood and hay. I knew we couldn't delay our decision much longer. The tenderness of the moment lingered amongst us, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes letting go wasn't equivalent to giving up. All we could do was navigate through this difficult journey together, hoping to do right by a life we cherished. The morning unfolded slowly, a thin veil of amber light creeping across the barn floor. It felt like any other day, yet there was an unmistakable heaviness in the air, one that even the walls seemed to recognize. Inside, Cassie and Eli were engaged in another quiet argument, a tension-filled conversation masked as logic. Eli wished to hold on to Scout, while Cassie believed in doing the right thing. I found myself caught in the middle, where two perspectives collided without clear resolution. I glanced at Scout, who lay beside me on the floor, his body pressed against my leg, not in fear but in trust. While he still bore the weight of uncertainty in his eyes, there was also a flicker of light beginning to shine through. Days had passed since he had stopped trembling, and I felt a gentle understanding between us as my fingers brushed the side of his neck, navigating through his fur that was still patchy in spots. The barn held a serene stillness, disrupted only by Scout's breath, a subtle sound that wasn't quite a bark or whimper, but something in between. Suddenly, I was reminded of the outside world. There, just beyond the eastern fence, was Whisper, standing alone, her form ghost-like in the dim light. She resembled a statue, her coat dulled by dust instead of rain. Unlike before, she neither stepped closer nor made a sound. She simply watched. Her eyes held no urgency or fear, just a mournful reflection that made my chest ache. At that moment it dawned on me. Whisper was here for a reason, not to guide us or protect Scout, but to facilitate a letting go. My thoughts drifted back to the crate positioned by the door, open and waiting. Cassie had lined it with soft fleece, and Eli had placed one of his old flannel shirts inside, the very one Scout loved to snuggle with at night. There had been no goodbyes exchanged, only the weight of unspoken understanding that hung in the air like dust in sunlight. With Scout resting peacefully beside me, I walked the barn's perimeter, checking the fence lines and the far edges of the field where the woods began. It was a routine I'd grown accustomed to, seeking a sense of normalcy amid the turmoil in my heart. As I moved, I caught a glimpse of Whisper again. She stood there, not waiting but watching. A silent reminder that whatever choice lay ahead, there would be no turning back, only the uncertain path forward. It's been a few weeks since Scout left us, and the barn feels different now. The tack room is almost empty without his presence, yet his scent still clings to the towels we hesitated to wash, a bittersweet reminder of what was. Eli has traded the loft for quiet nights alone, but sometimes I see him by the gate, hands tucked into his pockets, gazing toward the hills. I can almost feel his hope that Whisper will appear again, just like she did that first night. But she hasn't shown up, not once. When Scout was here, I knew he was healing, yet there was still an unspoken truth between us. He didn't belong to me, at least not forever. In that fleeting moment when our eyes met, I recognized the weight of that knowledge. He was with me, but I understood he would find his way elsewhere one day. Cassie was there too, kneeling beside me, her voice steady and gentle. "He'll be safe," she said, speaking about the woman who lived nearby. "There's plenty of forest, no noise, just space and patience." But her words fell flat for me. I felt they carried a distance, a kind of loss that masked itself in kindness. As I lifted Scout into my arms for the last time, I could feel his warmth against me, a comforting weight I wasn't ready to let go. He didn't resist. He just watched quietly as I placed him in the carrier, his head resting gently on Eli's shirt, calm and seemingly ready for what lay ahead. Stepping outside, I saw Whisper waiting just past the fence, still and quiet, the morning light illuminating the white blaze across her face. She remained motionless, her presence a silent acknowledgement of the journey both Scout and I were on, one that was only beginning to unfold for me. In that moment, I realized why Whisper had stayed by our side. Sometimes animals don't come into our lives to be saved. Sometimes they arrive to teach us about the beauty of letting go with love. The woman sends updates, sharing photos of Scout lounging in sunlit spots on her porch. He appears happier, his fur fuller, eyes brighter. She tells me he's still a bit timid, flinching at sudden noises and hesitant around men, but he's gradually learned to follow her from room to room. It's clear she's patient, waiting for him to approach when he feels ready. As night falls and I sit on the back steps of the barn, nursing a cup of coffee that has long gone cold, I wonder if Scout remembers the comforting scent of hay when the rain softly hit the roof. Does he recall the warmth of Eli's flannel or the rhythm of my boots as I paced just outside the stall? I hope he does. Rescue often leaves behind a trail of questions and uncertainties. It's not just about helping someone, but also about the pieces of ourselves we inadvertently scatter along the way. Have you ever found yourself reflecting on what you wished you could have done differently? That's part of the journey. There are moments, unexpected encounters, that show us profound lessons. Imagine a wild horse appearing in your life, reminding you of the bravery it takes to let go. It's not simply about rescue. It's about forming connections and understanding the right time for different kinds of love. Sometimes love means holding on tightly, and other times it requires us to set free those we care about. If this resonates with you, chances are you've experienced the mix of pain and beauty that comes from letting go or being chosen by a creature when you needed it most. You're not alone in this journey. Scout's story reminds us that, while not every tale has a perfect ending, each one carries its own heart. If you're interested in hearing more stories like this, those that might not conclude ideally, but are filled with meaning, consider subscribing for updates. And perhaps there's someone in your circle who would benefit from a reminder that even the smallest, most broken moments can lead us to something greater. If you have a story of your own about an animal that has impacted your life, we encourage you to share it with us in the comments. We take the time to read every one. Sometimes the process of healing isn't just about saving, it's also about truly seeing.